Welcome to my channel. If you love science fiction stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications. Ready? Let's begin. Rain wasn't supposed to sound this alive on metal, but tonight it had rhythm. A quick, panicked tapping, like fingers drumming out a warning. Jake Ralston squinted through the workshop window, watching rivulets race each other down the rusted pane. Outside, the wasteland shimmered under lightning flashes, and every flash showed the same thing. Nothing but mud, scrap, and the lonely glow of his half-broken defense beacon. Another night, another storm on the edge of nowhere. He leaned back in his chair, the cracked leather squealing in protest. "Well," he muttered, raising his cup of reheated synth coffee, "cheers to another evening of—" The knock came again. It wasn't the polite kind. It was sharp, uneven, desperate. He froze, cup halfway to his mouth. Visitors didn't just appear out here, not at midnight, not 30 clicks from the nearest settlement. "Probably a drone," he mumbled, trying to convince himself. "Delivery gone wrong again." He grabbed his plasma wrench, a mechanic's version of a baseball bat, and walked to the door. The knocking continued, weaker now, as if whoever, or whatever, was losing strength. When the door hissed open, cold wind and rain slapped him in the face. At first, he saw nothing but shadows. Then lightning tore across the sky, and he saw her. She was kneeling on the ground, drenched to the bone, clutching a small bundle against her chest. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the rain. Her eyes, silver-wide, glowing faintly like the reflection of a distant moon, met his. And her ears, long, tapering elegantly from her head, twitching as thunder cracked overhead. Jake blinked. You're not with the mail service, I take it." The woman swayed, clutching the bundle tighter. "Please," she whispered in broken English. "Help my child." Jake's stomach flipped. "Child." The bundle squirmed, letting out a faint cry, thin, high-pitched, and oddly melodic. Something inside glowed softly, a blue pulse beneath the soaked fabric. Okay, don't freak out," Jake muttered to himself, stepping aside. "Come in. Before you both catch hypothermia, or whatever your alien version of that is." She stumbled in, collapsing just past the threshold. Jake sealed the door with a metallic hiss, the storm now muted to a distant roar. His workshop's heater whined to life, spreading a faint warmth through the air. The woman lay motionless, chest rising and falling fast. The baby, if it was a baby, was wrapped tight, humming faintly with energy. Jake crouched beside her, tapping her cheek gently. "Hey, lady, you can't just pass out here. I mean, you can asterisk, but it's bad form." Her eyelids fluttered. "Safe." He looked around at his messy shop, grease-stained floor, shelves crammed with rusted ship parts, and a wall calendar from 3 years ago still showing June. "Safe-ish," he admitted. "Depends how you feel about tetanus." The faintest smile ghosted across her lips before she drifted into unconsciousness. Jake sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Great, stray cat night, but with aliens." He carried her awkwardly because she was taller and lighter than she looked to his cot in the back room. Her clothes were torn, half of them fused with what looked like thin metallic fibers. Scars ran along her arms, some still faintly glowing. He tried not to stare. "All right," he muttered, covering her with a blanket. "You rest. I'll figure out what the hell to do when you wake up." Then came the sound again, the soft cry from the bundle. He peeled the edge of the blanket back. Inside was a tiny creature, human-like, but with faintly luminous skin and small, twitching ears like its mother-s. The glow from its chest pulsed gently, in rhythm with its breathing. Jake stared for a long moment. "Well," he said finally, "I guess babysitting wasn't in the job description." The baby blinked up at him, eyes impossibly bright. Then it sneezed, an innocent, tiny asterisk, a chew asterisk, and every light in the workshop flickered. The heater groaned, sparks spat from the ceiling, and the coffee machine exploded in a puff of steam. Jake just stood there, dripping with condensation. "Okay, no big deal, just a baby with built-in EMP, totally normal night." He cleaned up the mess, grumbling the whole time. When he turned around, the baby had somehow rolled halfway off the cot and was staring at him like he was the weird one. "Don't give me that look," he said. "You blew up my coffee machine. We're not off to a good start." The baby cooed, almost like it was laughing. He sighed and sat back down, rubbing his temples. "Jake, old man, you should have retired to the inner colonies. Nice apartment, no alien drama, no explosions. But no, you had to come to the edge of nowhere and tinker with broken ships for beer money." The storm outside roared again, wind howling against the walls. The radar scanner on his desk flickered, one blip, then two, moving through the storm. Not drones, heat signatures. He froze. "Well," he whispered, Looks like Mom wasn't just sightseeing. He shut off the main lights, leaving only the faint blue glow from the infant's pulse. He stared at the unconscious woman, then at the sleeping child. "Guess we'll talk about this in the morning," he murmured. "If we're all still alive by then." Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming against the metal like a heartbeat. Inside, the mechanic sat beside two strangers from the stars, wondering what kind of storm he'd just let through his door. The storm had finally wandered off by morning, leaving behind a soaked world that glimmered faintly under a pale sun. Jake Ralston stood at the window, a cup of freshly brewed coffee steaming in his hands, courtesy of his backup machine, which he'd named Old Reliable, mostly despite the last one that had died in the line of sneeze fire. Behind him, something clattered. He turned just in time to see the alien woman, his uninvited guest, poking at his tools with cautious curiosity. She was awake, wrapped in one of his oversized maintenance jackets that practically swallowed her whole. Her long ears twitched when she noticed him watching. "You live here?" she asked slowly, her voice soft but steady. Her accent bent the words like they'd been learned from listening rather than being taught. "Live might be too generous a word," Jake said, leaning on the workbench. "More like I haunt the place, keeps the rats humble." Her expression didn't change for a second. Then after what felt like an eternity, the corner of her mouth twitched. "Haunt is good word," she said carefully, almost proud of herself. Jake chuckled. "Yeah, not bad. You speak English pretty well for someone who just crash-landed on my doorstep." She tilted her head. "Not crash, escape." Her eyes flickered with memory. "I fled." The humor in the air dimmed a little. Jake nodded, taking a sip of coffee to fill the silence. "From who?" "Hunters," she said simply. "They want my son for what is in him." Jake blinked. "You mean that cute little EMP generator?" She frowned. "EMP." He waved a hand. "Never mind. Let's just say he's got a lot of spark for his age." Almost on cue, the baby, who was now lying in an old blanket Jake had turned into a makeshift nest on the counter, made a small noise. A bubble of light shimmered above his tiny fingers before popping like soap. Jake jumped. Right, totally normal infant behavior. The woman stepped forward and touched the child's cheek gently. "His name is Kale," she said quietly. "He was born in the void while we ran. His energy, it is what they want." Jake frowned, scratching his chin. "Energy as in fuel, power source." She hesitated. "No, life source, my people Shaneth carry light within us. It is part of our mind, our soul. The humans call it bioluminescence." Jake whistled. "So your kid's got a supercharged soul and some space crooks want to turn him into a battery. Real classy." She looked up sharply. "Battery?" He shrugged. "Long story. Usually involves greed and terrible decisions." She gave a small, tired smile. "Then humans are not so different. Lady, you have no idea." The scanner on the workbench suddenly beeped, breaking the fragile peace. Jake glanced at it and swore under his breath. Two red dots were moving closer through the outskirts, still far but closing. "Looks like your friends from last night are back," he muttered. Her hand went instinctively to her child. "They found us again." "Not for long." Jake moved quickly, switching on his old defense systems. The hum of energy barriers came alive, the air around the garage crackling faintly. "Don't worry, these systems may look old, but they bite hard." She stared at the flickering holographic readouts in awe. "You are soldier." "Was," he said. "Now I fix things. Ships, engines, occasionally my own mistakes." She studied him for a long moment. "You could have turned us away." He shrugged. "Could have, but then who'd clean up the baby explosions?" Her laugh, quiet, musical, and strangely pure, filled the room like sunlight after storm clouds. Jake found himself smiling despite the tension in the air. "Okay, good," he said. "You do have a sense of humor. That's gonna make this less awkward when we're both possibly vaporized." "Vaporized?" she repeated, brows knitting. Nothing, mechanic joke, you'll learn." He returned to the console, scanning through the radar feed. The dots were closer now, moving in a straight line toward them. "Looks like two heat signatures, probably scout drones. If they find this place, they'll call in the rest." Lyra, she'd said her name was Lyra of Shaneth, though Jake had nearly choked trying to pronounce it properly, stepped beside him. "We cannot stay, they will come." "I know," Jake said, rubbing his temples. "But leaving in daylight means they'll spot us faster, and my hover truck is exactly in stealth mode." "Hover truck." He grinned and pointed toward the garage door. "You'll see. She's old, cranky, and held together by pure spite, but she flies." "Spite, it's human magic," he said. The baby sneezed again. The lights flickered and one of Jake's wall monitors fizzled out with a pop. He sighed. Kid's got timing. Lyra picked him up and murmured softly in her own tongue, the words flowing like wind through glass. The child quieted instantly. Jake couldn't understand a syllable, but the sound of it made the hairs on his neck stand up, not from fear, but something stranger, deeper. Lyra looked at him. We will bring you trouble, human. Jake took another sip of his coffee and stared out the window at the approaching storm of dust. Lady, Trouble and I have an exclusive relationship. You're just the latest in a long line. She didn't smile this time, and yet you help. He shrugged. What can I say, you knocked? She watched him a moment longer, as if trying to read him, then turned back to her child. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was the quiet before movement, the still breath before something changed forever. Outside, the scanners pulsed red again. Jake flexed his hands, cracked his neck, and muttered, All right, let's see what happens when space bounty hunters meet a bored mechanic with nothing left to lose. Lyra's ears twitched. You are strange, human. Jake grinned. That's what keeps me alive. And as the distant hum of engines began to rise beyond the horizon, the old mechanic powered up his battered hovertruck, muttering a prayer to the gods of grease and gravity. Because whatever came next, it was going to need both. The engines coughed awake like an old smoker refusing to die. Jake slapped the dashboard of the hovertruck twice, the way he always did, as if physical intimidation counted as mechanical maintenance. The truck's turbines sputtered, belched a puff of blue smoke, and finally settled into a rough, uneven hum that sounded like a drunk bee. See, Jake said, grinning triumphantly. Never doubted her for a second. Lyra sat in the passenger seat, holding Cale close, her silver eyes flicking uncertainly between Jake and the shaking controls. It sounds unhealthy. Unhealthy? Jake raised an eyebrow. Lady, this beauty's been running for 15 years on salvaged parts and caffeine fumes. That's asterisk peak human engineering right there. A low whine came from beneath them, followed by a metallic clunk. Lyra stared. Jake coughed. Minor hiccup. She just needs encouragement. He patted the side of the truck affectionately. Come on, girl, show the nice alien your best side. Outside, the storm had cleared into a dusty horizon, pale orange under the morning sun. Jake steered the hovertruck through the uneven terrain, the vehicle gliding a few feet above the cracked ground. The defense towers on the horizon blinked faintly, old relics of the frontier war, now mostly scavenged for parts. Lyra's gaze lingered on the ruins as they passed. You fought here, she said softly. Jake glanced at her, caught off guard. How'd you guess? You carry ghosts, she said, tapping 2 fingers against her temple. And your machines. They are wounded yet alive. That is a soldier's habit. He exhaled slowly. Yeah, well, the war ended, but nobody told the ghosts. Silence filled the cabin for a few moments, broken only by the hum of the truck. Cale stirred, eyes fluttering open, his tiny fingers reaching toward the windshield where the sunlight streamed through. The glow from his hand brightened, scattering soft light through the cabin. Jake squinted. Kid S got a built-in nightlight. Handy feature. Lyra smiled faintly. He likes the sun. We were born in darkness beneath iron skies. He has never seen real light before. Jake nodded, eyes still on the scanners. Well, he's in for a treat. Sunlight, dust, bandits, toxic air. Welcome to the human frontier. Her laughter, soft and melodic, filled the truck for a moment. Then the scanner on Jake's console beeped sharply. He leaned forward, 2 dots, fast-moving, closing in. Ah, hell, he muttered. Guess our fan club found us again. Lyra turned toward the rear window. 2 specks of black shimmered against the desert glare, sleek drones, wings humming with energy. They're trackers, she said, from the raider ship. They can smell my kind across stars. Jake flicked a few switches on the console, and the back of the hovertruck rattled open, revealing a mounted turret that looked like it had been welded together from spare parts and wishful thinking. Smell this, he said, pulling the lever. The turret fired a burst of plasma bolts, wildly inaccurate, half of them disappearing into the sand, but the rest forcing the drones to swerve. Still got it? Jake shouted, grinning. Lyra clung to her seat as the truck lurched over a dune. Do all humans celebrate during danger? It's either that or panic, Jake said, and I ran out of panic 5 years ago. One of the drones dove closer, its energy cannon charging. Lyra shouted something in her language, a sharp, flowing command, and Cale suddenly glowed brighter. A pulse of energy rippled from him, invisible but powerful. The drone system stuttered midair, then exploded in a burst of sparks. Jake whistled. Remind me to put him on the payroll. Kale giggled, waving his hand as though proud of himself. The second drone veered off but fired a plasma bolt that hit the truck's rear stabilizer. The vehicle spun slightly before Jake regained control, teeth clenched. "All right, that's it," he growled. He hit a switch on the console and a compartment opened under the truck, releasing a cloud of ionized dust. The pursuing drone's sensors scrambled instantly and it spiraled down into the sand. Lyra blinked. "You used dirt." "As a weapon," Jake smirked. "That's what we call adaptive engineering. When all else fails, throw the planet at it." The truck glided to a slower pace as the last drone crashed behind them. Jake exhaled, gripping the controls tightly. The adrenaline slowly faded, replaced by the buzzing of the engines and the faint sound of the baby cooing. Lyra turned to him. "They will not stop." "I figured." He adjusted the navigation. "There's an old research station about 20 clicks north. Used to belong to the Terran Biogen Corps before the war. It'll have shelter, maybe some supplies, and more importantly, metal doors." She hesitated. "You risk much for someone you do not know." Jake gave a short laugh. "You say that like it's the first time I've made a bad decision." "You do not fear me?" she asked, curious. "Should I?" Her eyes glinted with a feint. The air inside the old research station was thick with dust and memory. Every step echoed, every door creaked as if complaining about being disturbed after decades of silence. Jake's flashlight cut through the dim corridors, revealing shattered consoles, scorched walls, and long-dead machines that once hummed with purpose. Now they were just ghosts, silent, heavy, and slightly judgmental. Lyra followed behind him, her long ears twitching at each new sound. Kale was secured against her chest in a sling Jake had fashioned from an old tarp. The baby's faint glow gave them a second light source, softer, steadier, and far less likely to explode. Jake wiped a layer of grime off a wall panel and whistled. "Biogen Labs, level 3 clearance only. Guess that means there's either something valuable or something that'll eat us." Lyra frowned. "Eat us," he smiled. Figure of speech. Usually, he pressed a few buttons on the console and to his surprise, a low hum vibrated through the floor. Faint lights flickered along the ceiling, sputtering to life one by one. Lyra's eyes widened. "You made it live again." Jake smirked. "Yeah, well, machines and I have an understanding. I fix them, they don't explode near me, most of the time." Kale cooed, reaching toward one of the glowing panels. His touch left a faint shimmer that spread across the wall like bioluminescent ink. The light pattern lingered, pulsing gently. Jake blinked. "Okay, so your kid's also a walking light switch. That's new." Lyra touched the glowing mark, her face softening. "The light recognizes him. It is Shaneth technology. My people helped build these labs before the war. Humans wanted to learn from our energy." Jake raised a brow. "And I'm guessing that went about as well as every other human Let's Study the Aliens project." She nodded. "They tried to harness it. Some succeeded, some burned." "Classic," he said. They found a room still intact enough to serve as shelter. Jake set up a portable heater, while Lyra laid Kale on a makeshift bed made of old lab coats. The baby gurgled, happy for the first time in days, and reached for Jake's hand. His tiny fingers wrapped around one of Jake's calloused ones, glowing faintly. Jake looked at Lyra. "He's weirdly calming for someone who nearly nuked my workshop." "Kale senses hearts," she said softly. "He knows when they are safe." Jake tried to hide the awkward warmth that crawled up his neck. "Well, tell him not to get too attached. I'm bad with long-term commitments. Just ask my ex." Lyra blinked. "Ex," he groaned. "Never mind. That's a human word for someone who used to like you but then realized you leave tools in the kitchen sink." She tilted her head, utterly serious. "That sounds tragic." Jake laughed, the sound echoing through the empty room. Yeah, it was. For a while, the silence between them wasn't awkward. She sat near the heater, humming a melody that didn't belong to this world, slow, ethereal like starlight turned into sound. Kale drifted to sleep listening to it. Jake leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes, letting the strange peace settle in. But peace, in Jake's experience, was like duct tape, temporary and always peeling at the edges. The faint ping of the radar broke the calm. He pulled out his handheld scanner, frowning. A faint energy signature was flickering near the lower levels of the station. "Well, that's not creepy at all." Lyra looked up. "Something is here. Could be a power cell," he said. "Could be a corpse. Could be something worse." He stood, grabbing his wrench. "Guess we'll find out." "I will come," she said firmly. He hesitated. "You sure you've got the kid?" Her silver eyes hardened. "If there is danger, Kale will be safer with both of us alive." He couldn't argue with that logic. Fair point. Let's try not to make it both of us dead, though. They descended through a cracked stairwell that smelled of ozone and rust. Faint blue lights guided their path, though Jake swore they weren't there before. When they reached the lower chamber, the air grew colder. In the center of the room stood a cylindrical pod, half buried in sand and rubble. A single line of alien script pulsed on its surface. Lyra stepped forward, whispering something in her language. The pod responded, releasing a hiss of air. Jake tensed, holding his wrench like a sword. "What did you just say?" "I told it I was home," she murmured. The pod opened with a slow, resonant hum. Inside was a sphere of light shifting, alive almost like it was breathing. Lyra's face filled with awe. "This is a memory core. It holds knowledge from my people. I thought they were all destroyed." Jake squinted. "Looks like a fancy space light bulb to me." She smiled faintly. "It remembers voices, lives, whole histories." The light pulsed, then projected an image into the air. A starfield, fractured and swirling, and then faces. Shaneth faces. Lyra reached toward it like someone touching a ghost. Jake watched in silence, realizing this wasn't just technology. It was heritage, grief, hope, but the awe didn't last. The scanner on his wrist beeped again, this time sharply, movement on the surface. Multiple heat signatures closing fast. "Company," he said grimly. Lyra's gaze didn't leave the projection. "They followed the signal." Jake shut down the core and pulled her away. "Then we move now, grab the kid." They ran back through the corridors, footsteps echoing like thunder. Kale stirred but didn't cry. His glow dimmed instinctively, as if he understood. When they burst out into the open air, Jake spotted shapes on the horizon, 4, maybe 5 hoverbikes slicing through the dust. Raiders, the same bastards who'd chased them before. "All right," Jake muttered, jumping into the driver's seat. "Round 2, let's make it messy." Lyra strapped herself in, Kale secure in her arms. "You have a plan." "Always," Jake said, revving the engine. "It's a bad one, but it's a plan." As the hover truck roared to life and the raiders closed in, Lyra glanced at him. "You joke even in danger." He grinned. "Lady, if I stop joking, it means I've accepted death, and I'm not that polite." The truck surged forward, sand flying, engines screaming. Behind them, plasma bolts lit up the dawn. Ahead, the wasteland waited, wide, endless, and if they were lucky, not entirely fatal. The desert roared around them, the hover truck bouncing like a drunken kangaroo over dunes that looked suspiciously higher than they did 5 seconds ago. Plasma bolts streaked past, carving glowing scars in the sand. Jake gritted his teeth, yanking the controls hard to the left. "Hold on," he shouted. Lyra, clutching Kale, barely had time to respond before the truck skidded sideways, spinning up a wave of sand that blinded the raiders behind them. A shot grazed their rear stabilizer, sending sparks flying. "You said you had a plan," Lyra yelled over the chaos. "I do," Jake shouted back. "Step 1, don't die. Step 2, working on it." The engine howled, the dashboard flashing red. A very unhelpful robotic voice blared, warning, catastrophic engine failure imminent. Jake glared at it. "Yeah, thanks, Nancy, I noticed." Lyra's eyes darted to the horizon. "There, a canyon." Jake squinted. "You sure that's not just a mirage?" "Even if it is," she said grimly, "it's better than the men with guns. Can't argue with that logic." He jerked the wheel again, sending the truck barreling toward the shimmering ridge. The raiders followed, their bikes slicing through the sand like sharks through water. One drew close enough that Jake could see his grin, a nasty metallic thing, and the barrel of a plasma rifle glowing blue. Jake reached under his seat, pulling out what looked like a lunchbox with wires taped to it. "Ever heard of a plasma flux grenade?" Lyra blinked. "Is that safe?" "Nope." He tossed it out the window. The explosion behind them was less a bang and more a scream of light. The shockwave lifted the truck slightly, then slammed it back down. Jake whooped. "See, perfectly under control." The front axle immediately snapped in half. "Mostly under control." He corrected. They hit the canyon rim, flying over it for one heart-stopping second before gravity remembered its job. The truck dropped, bounced twice, and crashed nose first into the sand. Silence. Smoke. A distant, sad beep from the dashboard. Jake's head thudded against the steering column. "Ow, 10 out of 10 landing." Lyra groaned, unstrapping herself. "Are you alive?" "Depends. Do you see any angels?" "I see you." "Then no." She gave him a look somewhere between confusion and pity. Kale gurgled softly in her arms, as if laughing at the both of them. Jake kicked open the crumpled door and staggered out. Above them, the canyon walls glowed faintly, their surfaces lined with metallic veins that pulsed blue. It wasn't natural rock, it was old tech. He whistled low. Well, would you look at that? We just crashed into a dead alien city. Again. Lyra's gaze softened. This is not dead. This is part of the old network, the Shaneth data veins. My ancestors used them to move energy between outposts. Jake crouched beside one of the glowing lines, pulling out a multi-tool. Energy veins, huh? So, theoretically, could one of these jumpstart a hover truck? She blinked. You wish to plug your vehicle into the sacred heart of an ancient civilization. He grinned. I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds bad. Lyra sighed. Do it quickly. He connected a cable to the glowing conduit. The truck lights flickered, then roared back to life with a throaty growl. Ha, see. Who needs divine permission when you've got duct tape? The canyon trembled. Jake froze. Did your sacred heart just burp? Lyra's expression turned pale. You awakened something. A low hum filled the air. The blue veins brightened until the canyon glowed like a forge. Then the light gathered into shapes, floating geometric drones rising out of the sand like ghosts. Defense automatons, she whispered. They think we are intruders. Jake sighed. They're not wrong. The drones turned toward them, lenses flaring. Jake threw his wrench aside. All right, diplomacy time. He raised both hands. Hi, humans, totally not here to rob the place. One of the drones scanned him, let out a chirp, and fired a warning shot that vaporized a nearby rock. Okay, Jake muttered, so not the chatty type. Lyra whispered rapidly in her language, her hands glowing faintly as she tried to communicate. The drones paused, hovering uncertainly. One emitted a questioning tone. Jake leaned toward her. Are they buying it? I told them we are carriers of the Shaneth light, she murmured. Jake frowned. That true. Kale stirred, opening his tiny glowing eyes. The nearest drone beeped twice, then lowered its weapon. One by one, the others followed suit, hovering peacefully again. Jake exhaled. Okay. I take back everything I said about your kid blowing stuff up. He's the best security clearance I've ever seen. Lyra smiled faintly. He is the bridge between worlds. They recognize his essence. Yeah, well, maybe his essence can help us find some snacks, because I'm starving. They set up camp inside one of the intact structures, its interior filled with faintly glowing glyphs and forgotten machines. Jake scavenged some power cells, a few metallic canisters, and a very suspicious jar labeled in alien script. What's that? Lyra asked. He sniffed it. Smells like pickles and jet fuel. Do not eat it. Wouldn't dream of it. He pocketed it anyway. Later, as they sat around a flickering heat lamp, Lyra asked quietly, You joke when you are afraid, don't you? Jake stared at the tiny flame. Yeah. It's either that or panic, and I'm not great at panicking gracefully. She smiled faintly. Your fear hides well behind laughter. He shrugged. Yours hides behind big speeches and shiny eyes. We all cope. Kale reached toward him again, glowing softly. Jake let the baby wrap a tiny hand around his finger. For a brief moment, all the chaos, all the danger seemed to fade. Outside, the canyon walls pulsed with quiet light, alive again after centuries. Somewhere far above, the raiders circled, searching. But for now, deep below the surface, surrounded by alien machines and fading echoes, Jake allowed himself something rare. A small, exhausted laugh and the tiniest sliver of peace. The next morning, or what passed for morning underground, Jake woke up to the sound of something humming near his head. He cracked one eye open and found a drone floating inches from his nose, its lens blinking like an impatient pet. Morning, toaster, he muttered, swatting at it. The drone beeped indignantly and zipped away. Lyra was already awake, standing near a wall of ancient consoles that had somehow powered back on overnight. She looked ethereal in the pale blue light, her long ears twitching slightly as holographic data shimmered around her fingertips. Jake rubbed his eyes. You look like you're hacking the universe. I am listening, she said softly. These machines speak, they remember. Jake squinted. Cool, can they remember how to make coffee? She gave him a puzzled look. Is that a weapon? Only if you take it away from me before I've had some. Kale cooed from his makeshift crib, a crate padded with a piece of Jake's jacket. The baby's soft glow pulsed in time with the veins in the walls, like he was part of the system now. Lyra bent to pick him up, her expression turning serious. They know us now, she said quietly. The Shaneth network, it is waking. Jake frowned. Waking, like in a metaphorical sense or a we're all about to get disintegrated sense. She hesitated. Both, perhaps. Great. Love that ambiguity first thing in the morning. The walls pulsed brighter, symbols scrolled across the consoles, too fast for Jake to read. He caught glimpses of star maps, fleet schematics, and something that looked disturbingly like a human skull made of light. That's not ominous at all, he muttered. Lyra reached toward the display. They're showing me coordinates, a signal. Jake sighed. Please tell me it's coordinates to a nice quiet beach planet with a bar. She ignored him, her voice turning reverent. It's a beacon from one of my people, another survivor. Jake straightened. Wait, someone else made it off your planet? Her eyes shimmered. It seems so, but they're trapped. The signal comes from the orbit of Ganam 9, the old human military outpost. Jake groaned, of course. Because nothing says easy rescue mission like sneaking into a fortress run by paranoid cyborg marines. Lyra's ears drooped slightly. You do not have to come. He looked at her, then at Kale, who was busy trying to chew on his finger. Yeah, I do. Someone gotta make sure you don't vaporize yourself touching ancient alien Wi-Fi. She smiled faintly. You hide your courage behind sarcasm, and you hide your sarcasm behind courage, he shot back. She tilted her head. That makes no sense. Exactly, he said. That's my specialty. They spent hours scavenging through the ruins, gathering supplies. Jake found a hoverbike that was mostly intact, if you ignored the missing stabilizer and the fact that it occasionally screamed when turned on. Lyra repaired it with a few flicks of her energy threads, and soon the machine hummed like new. Well, Jake said, patting it, it's not exactly regulation safe, but neither am I. Lyra looked at him warily as he straddled the bike. You drive like a lunatic. Lunatics have more fun. They sped through the canyon, weaving past the glowing walls until they emerged into sunlight again. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, but far on the horizon gleamed the shimmer of the orbital elevator, what remained of it anyway. Jake grinned. Next stop, space. Lyra adjusted her cloak, Kale bundled against her chest. I still do not understand how humans built towers that touch the sky. Simple, Jake said. We got bored. The closer they got, the more obvious it became that the tower was half collapsed. The elevator's base was surrounded by rusted machines and scavengers who looked ready to shoot first and negotiate never. Jake parked the bike behind a dune. Okay, he whispered. New plan, we sneak in quietly. Lyra raised an eyebrow. You are not capable of quiet. Hey, I can be stealthy, watch this. He crouched, took one step, and immediately tripped over a loose piece of metal, landing face first in the sand. Kale squealed in delight. Jake spat grit. I did that on purpose, testing gravity. Lyra sighed. Perhaps I should lead. Be my guest, he said, brushing himself off. She moved like liquid shadow, her cloak blending with the light. Jake tried to imitate her badly. By the time they reached the elevator base, he was covered in sand, sweat, and bruised pride. Inside the ruined structure, the air was cool and filled with echoes. A few scavengers argued over parts near a pile of scrap, but Lyra whispered something under her breath, and the lights flickered, distracting them just long enough for Jake and Lyra to slip by. They reached the control chamber where a single intact terminal blinked faintly. Jake wiped dust from it and found a card reader. Okay, this looks ancient. Maybe I can rig it too. Before he could finish, Kale reached out and touched the console. The whole structure hummed to life. Jake froze. He really needs a warning label. The elevator groaned, gears grinding, cables tightening. A beam of blue light shot skyward, connecting to a faintly glowing station far above the clouds. Lyra's eyes widened. It still works. Jake gave a shaky grin. Yeah, but let's not celebrate yet. It's been asleep for centuries. Odds are 50-50 it launches us into space or blows up trying. Lyra stepped into the platform. Then we trust. Jake looked at her, then the baby, then the ancient machine that hummed like a god waking up from a nap. He sighed. Trust, right, worst idea ever. He stepped onto the platform beside her. The light engulfed them, and with a thunderous crack they began to rise toward the stars. Jake muttered under his breath, if we survive this, I'm buying us all coffee, even the baby. Lyra smiled faintly. I still don't know what that is. You will, he said. If we make it to orbit, you're getting the deluxe human experience. Kale gurgled. Jake smiled. See, he's in. And as the desert fell away below them, the first hints of starlight glittered through the atmosphere, cold, distant, and waiting. The elevator shuddered as it climbed through the thinning air, its ancient systems groaning like an old man forced out of retirement. Jake clung to the side rail, knuckles white, as the transparent walls revealed the desert shrinking beneath them. Remind me, he said through clenched teeth, why we thought riding a 5,000-year-old death pole into orbit was a good idea. Lyra stood perfectly still, calm as a statue, her cloak rippling slightly in the rising wind. Because we had no other choice, she replied, and because you refused to walk. Jake laughed nervously. Yeah, well, spacewalks don't usually start with actual walking. Kale let out a soft coo, glowing faintly in Lyra's arms. The elevator responded with a deep hum, the light around them shifting from pale blue to brilliant silver. Jake eyed the change warily. Okay, that's either the system stabilizing or the pre-explosion light show. I give it even odds. Lyra looked up, her eyes reflecting the stars. It is aligning with the orbital station. The hum grew louder until the sound became vibration, then silence. The motion stopped so abruptly that Jake almost fell over. Above them, the platform doors opened with a hiss, revealing a corridor bathed in sterile white light. Jake peered out cautiously. Well, it's not on fire, that's a good sign. Lyra stepped forward, her boots echoing softly against the metal floor. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something else, something clean and impossibly old. Jake followed, muttering, I swear if a cleaning robot attacks me again, I'm quitting space forever. The corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with stasis pods, hundreds of them, arranged in neat rows. Frosted glass shimmered faintly, each capsule pulsing with a dim blue glow. Lyra froze. These are not human. Jake glanced at one of the pods. Inside was a tall figure with long ears, features eerily similar to Lyra's. So, your people really made it here, he whispered. Lyra pressed a hand to the glass. They are in deep cryosuspension, centuries of sleep. Jake looked around uneasily. Guess they weren't big on alarms. You'd think someone would have left a note saying, hey, maybe don't nap through the apocalypse. A faint sound echoed through the chamber, footsteps. Jake instinctively ducked behind a console. A figure emerged from the far end of the room, wrapped in dark, battered armor, its face obscured by a cracked visor. Lyra's breath caught. It's her, she whispered. Jake frowned. Her who? The signal I followed, the last of the Shaneth sentinels. The armored figure stopped a few meters away and raised a weapon. Her voice came through the helmet, distorted but unmistakably female. Identify yourself? Lyra stepped forward. Lyra of the House of Ven, daughter of the fallen moon. I bring the air. The figure hesitated. Impossible, the line was broken. Lyra unwrapped Kale just enough for his soft glow to fill the chamber. The sentinel stiffened. By the stars, it's true. Jake peeked out from behind the console. Yeah, hi, human here, just tagging along, please don't shoot. The sentinel lowered her weapon slowly. You've brought danger with you, the humans of the old colonies, what remains of them hunt us still. Jake shrugged. To be fair, humans hunt everything. We're not exactly known for our restraint. Lyra ignored him. We came seeking refuge. My child, our future, cannot survive alone. The sentinel's visor flickered, revealing tired, golden eyes. Then you must restore the network. Jake blinked. You say that like it's a thing we can just turn on, and the floor trembled violently. Warning lights flared to life. A robotic voice boomed. Unauthorized energy surge detected. Jake groaned. You just had to say something, didn't you? From the ceiling, panels slid open, releasing sleek defense drones, shining spheres armed with blasters that hummed with deadly intent. Cover, Jake shouted, diving behind a console as bolts of plasma scorched the floor. Lyra shielded Kale with her cloak, raising one hand. Blue energy surged from her fingertips, forming a shimmering barrier that deflected the shots. The sentinel moved like lightning, her blade cutting through two drones with surgical precision. Jake popped up long enough to fire his pistol, an antique blaster that misfired half the time but looked cool while doing it. The station drifted silently above the desert world, bathed in the faint glow of sunrise below. Inside, the hum of ancient systems now sounded like breathing, steady, alive. The Shaneth had awakened. The air shimmered with their quiet songs, a resonance that made the metal itself seem to vibrate in harmony. Jake sat on the edge of the platform, feet dangling over a view that stretched forever. He held a mug of something that might have been coffee or might have been oil, depending on which alien made it. He sipped anyway. You know, he muttered, I miss gravity that doesn't require a seatbelt. Lyra joined him, her long ears flicking gently in the artificial breeze. She wore a robe of woven light now, her posture different, calmer, stronger. Kale floated beside her in a soft cocoon of energy, babbling happily to a curious drone that seemed convinced he was its new commander. You are quiet, she said. I'm thinking, Jake replied, trying to decide if this makes me a hero or just the galaxy's luckiest idiot. She smiled. You were never lucky, you were chosen. Chosen? He raised a brow. Pretty sure I just opened the wrong door one night and found an alien baby instead of a pizza delivery. Lyra's laughter was soft, musical. Fate often hides behind accidents. He shrugged. Yeah, well, if fate's listening, Tell it I'd like fewer plasma gunfights next time. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the first of the Shaneth move about the reawakened station. The sentinel, the one who'd greeted them with a gun, was now leading groups to different sectors, speaking in clipped tones, re-establishing systems. The hum of power spread outward like ripples through water. Jake glanced at Lyra. So what happens now? You rebuild your civilization, start over. Her eyes softened. We remember, we learn, we forgive, and we protect what still lives. She looked at him. That includes you, Jake Carter of Earth. He chuckled. I never thought I'd make it into the ancient alien protection plan. Kinda ruins my rugged outlaw image. You have no such image, she teased gently. He feigned offense. I do too, it's very subtle. Mostly in the way, I trip over destiny and survive by accident. Lyra's smile lingered, but her tone turned thoughtful. You could stay. The Shaneth have much to offer, a home, knowledge, peace. Jake stared into his mug. Tempting. But I think peace would get bored of me pretty fast. She tilted her head. You miss your world. Sometimes, mostly the food and bad TV and my old wrench. He grinned. But yeah, I think humans are still out there breaking things. Someone's gotta fix them. Lyra looked away, her expression unreadable. You have changed. He snorted. You mean I've showered and stopped swearing every 5 seconds? I mean your heart, she said simply. You no longer hide it behind jokes. Jake opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. She was right, of course. Somewhere between the plasma grenades, alien ruins, and baby-saving chaos, something had shifted. He started caring, not just about surviving, but about asterisk them, about something bigger than himself. He sighed. Yeah, guess I picked up a conscience along the way, feels weird, heavy. Lyra reached out and touched his shoulder. Heavy things are worth carrying. Before he could reply, Cale giggled, a bright, echoing sound that made the air itself shimmer. Lyra smiled and lifted him. The baby's eyes glowed softly, reflecting stars. Jake chuckled. Kid's already got better cosmic Wi-Fi than I ever will. He will have more, Lyra whispered. He will walk between worlds, ours and yours. Maybe one day he will teach both sides what it means to be more than what they were. Jake nodded slowly. Then I'd say he's got a better start than either of us did. The sentinel approached, her scarred face calm. The network stabilizes, the Shaneth will thrive again. You have done what no human has done before, Jake Carter. He raised his mug in mock salute. Hey, I try to set low expectations and still surprise people. She didn't smile, but there was warmth in her eyes. The Council wishes to offer you sanctuary among us. You would be remembered as a friend of the stars. Jake looked between them, the sentinel, Lyra, Cale, and then out at the horizon where Earth's faint reflection shimmered among the stars. Sanctuary's nice, but I've got a feeling trouble back home misses me. Lyra's voice was quiet. Will you return to your people? He nodded. For now. Someone's gotta tell them the universe isn't as empty as they think. Lyra hesitated, then stepped closer, placing her forehead gently against his. Then go with the light, wanderer. Jake smiled. And you stay with it, moon girl. When he finally boarded the old shuttle the Shaneth had repaired for him, Cale reached out, his tiny hand glowing. Jake let him grip his finger one last time. Take care of your mom, little guy. She's the brave one. As the engines roared and the shuttle drifted free, he looked back. Lyra stood with Cale in her arms, surrounded by her people and the endless shimmer of reborn light. The station turned slowly, like a great eye opening for the first time in ages. The stars stretched ahead, endless,